I think the whole act of putting a Barbie up the ass was it was multiple layers in that whole thing.
In a way, is it harder to be subversive? You get my idea. Now than maybe 30 years ago, trying to understand how society evolved towards the work of someone like you when you put something.
I mean, but one of the problems is yes, the world is more difficult to be, quote, subversive. Maybe the question there is more difficult to ask and present certain issues than it was before. And at the same time, the fact that it is more difficult means that maybe the issues are even more important and the discussion needs to be happening. And it's not that I have an answer, but as an artist, I somehow form questions around these things, these subjects, and form objects that confront these issues and rattle the cage or stir up the soup. And it's because I think we're now in a very blind period, and it's a very everything's caving in. You know, is it 9/11 that did that, or what happened? It's this caving in and this like pulling the sheets over your head, and that's affecting values and everything. And everybody's, the Western culture is regressing into what appears to be a blindness or a darkness. And so it's probably, yes, it's more difficult to answer the questions, and the questions are more important to be asked. And it's not that I view myself as knowing what the questions all are or the answers. It's really about, as an artist, this is what comes out. This is what gets made. And sometimes it's difficult for me to understand what it exactly means or it exactly is. And but then that's what art does. It sits there and you have to struggle with it. I think the whole act of putting a Barbie up the ass was it was multiple layers in that whole thing. One was this the head, like me being the human, and in my head going into a black void, and the head of the doll being a representation of a human and its head in the void, or its head into a darkness, and then this thing of the inside and the outside, and the body, my body bent over with the doll coming out the ass, and then the doll not being really a doll, but being a stick or a phallic, and and then it's not clear to the audience what's going on there. I think they realized it and didn't realize it. I think I'm facing them, so they can't see, but they kind of suspect that that's going on, And it wasn't planned. It wasn't. I didn't. In fact, most of that performance was not planned. And what happened that night, I didn't. At one point I crawl underneath the chair, and I drank all this ketchup, and I didn't realize I drank ketchup before, and it kind of made me throw up. But I drank a lot, or it consumed a lot that night, and that on top of hand lotion really made me vomit, and that's why the people, I guess, left. They leave the room. Why they left them? And I was under them, under the chair, and under this underground, or being, a lot of it is this personality that is both a force in the room and then becomes or is an instructor. It begins by being an instructor.
Oops. I'm almost done, huh?
Yeah.
I know you have to go.
No, let me just close. It begins, you know, like it's you know, it begins by me being an instructor, and then ends by me being underneath everybody, and you know, like the pariah of the room, you know, the one that's, you know, the disease. As a student, I had real difficulty, learning disabilities, and I couldn't read a book. Didn't read a book until I was out of high school, and could barely read. And that all changes. It really was a crazy thing. This sort of dyslexia, or this perceptual, it was auditory as well as visual. It sort of began to dissipate. Although I read slow, I read a lot now. But there was this early period of, and I think it was a lot about just, and believing that there's something wrong, something wrong with me. And when I was growing up in school, that being smart enough to figure out that there was something wrong.
Sorry, I get
Should I have Phoebe leave? Phoebe could leave.
No, Phoebe, if you're good, you can stay.
Well, that's no guarantee.
That's not guarantee. Yeah.
Well, she doesn't do much other than she just gets up and kind of...
Once in a while?
Just wants to get a little attention.
And you were talking about the Disney figures. Why Disney? What did it represent in your mind? Why was it something you wanted to, distort those childlike?
Well, Phoebe, you're noisy.
It's okay, I don't hear her in your mic.
I hear her.
Oh, you want me to?
No,
like her out?
Phoebe. Yeah, maybe we let her out. Oh, she's all right. Okay.
So why Disney? What does Disney represent?
As let me think about this for a minute. It's kind of tough. I keep thinking about Phoebe.
Maybe you should let her out. No.
Phoebe, dude, go over there. Go over there. Go away. Go away. Get your butt out of here. Yeah, stay there. There we go. So, okay, much better.
Because yeah.
I wanted at that time to do a remake of the story of Heidi, and this was in the late 70s. And Pinocchio, I became interested in Pinocchio. And so it sort of starts there. And then at the same time, and by then we're hitting late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s. And then I start really looking at Disneyland. And at that point, I was interested in Disneyland. I became interested in Disneyland on a lot of levels. One is that it was this enclosed artificial society, or this enclosed artificial Shangri-La, or perfect world. And this idea of a perfect world, and that it was all artificial, and that people would take, and then to the point that Disneyland began to create hotels on the property, and people would take their vacation at Disneyland. In a sense, kind of like leaving and going to another world, like leaving the Earth and going to another reality. And the reality was inhabited by these aliens, which were Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse. And I began to see it as this kind of Shangri-La, or this kind of allusion to heaven. And that and then I became really interested in how it is laid out, and that is that Disneyland has a mountain around it. It has a hill, and you sort of pass through a gate, and the hill sort of blocks off the rest of the world. And they went so far as to talk about it, that Disneyland was a dreamscape. Do you have to change something?
No, I'm just doing
okay. That Disneyland was a dreamscape. And I remember at one time I actually got on the back lot of Disneyland, and there was a squirrel there, one of the characters, and his head was off. And he was smoking a cigarette. And so I'm standing there and I'm thinking, well, that's very bizarre. Here's this squirrel body with a human head smoking a cigarette. And I said something to one of the people that was taking us on the tour, and they said, well, you know, that somebody asked about photographing it, and they said, oh, you can't photograph. That breaks the dream. And or it could lead to breaking the dream, right? And I remember there was a Walter Benjamin term called breaking the dream, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. You know, this sort of, you know, this there's a dream world, and you enter a dream world, and so there were these things about Disney, and then there was also just this sort of the scale of it as a sculpture. Disneyland as a sculpture, and the perfection, the icon of Mickey Mouse being a perfect form, like that the shoes are perfect, the relationship of the leg to the shoe, the relationship of the neck to the head or the body, and the hands, the gloves, the form itself, and I think so. And like I said, I was interested in it, and there's a point where I directly tried to make it, or to make a version, or in a very kind of, you know, clumsy way in my studio or something, with not understanding the technology of how to even make a form, what clay to use, what mold to use, how to make a mold, all this.